Boo, 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 boo. Test 2, 3. You're getting ready to get rolling. John Phillips said, I got a date after this for some tapas with my baby. Gotta go. This is probably all we got tonight anyway. It doesn't look like, I just took a quick scan down the hall. Doesn't look like there's anybody else coming, so we're going to get started shortly. If you want to find your seats and make a last quick trip to the facilities. Thank you very much. Consider buying a membership. This space costs a little money, and the things that we do, which is a lot of different stuff, costs a little bit of money. It's only $8 a month. There's a lot of ways to do it, and you can talk to Scrubs himself, Mr. Brian over here, about supporting the effort. You're not just supporting Mythicist Milwaukee like we're, out here selling widgets, but you're supporting the efforts of your local secular community here. Yeah, Brian has to wear those scrubs. Yeah, the barrel's cool. You can bring the barrel next time too, man. By supporting us, you help us keep bringing you diversions that you enjoy as secular people in the area. Brian, do you have anything special that you want to add? There's the big debate on October 21st. Please come. Please get a ticket. Please spread the word about it. October 21st, it's a Friday. It's in the afternoon. There is a convention involved. It's 4 speakers leading up to a big debate on mythicism itself, whether or not Jesus existed. A New Testament theologian, heavyweights. Thank you, Brian. Versus Dr. Robert Price. Really, 2 of the top mythicists, New Testament historians going head-to-head on whether Jesus existed or not. That's after an afternoon of speakers from around the secular world, including Dan Barker from FFRF and Allie Jackson from Atheist Republic. So look for that and do what you can do to come and spread the word. We also have trivia on Thursday night. I represent Craft in Kenosha. More closely allied with the separation of church and state kind of stuff and getting the word out in schools as to the secular way of thinking. If you're interested in that, you can look for us there too. We have Melissa Pugh tonight. She's here for the second time, honing her skills as a public speaker on her way to doing what? Is a dissertation? What is it? I guess some kind of oral presentation, something educational. And going to talk to us about misogyny in religion, a short history. So please welcome back Melissa Pugh. Thanks.
Misogyny, especially in religious history, has a very, very long history. I can't even get through all of it in an hour and a half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on certain points, and then we're going to do a group discussion and try to get some input from you guys, any kind of historical evidence you guys have or examples that you can think of misogyny in history, religious history. I'm going to start with the ancient Greeks. I think everyone knows a lot about ancient Greece. We've all been taught the myths. We've all read the myths. How many people who don't know who Pandora is? Everyone knows who Pandora is, right? No, Pandora's not the radio app. I'm actually talking about the Greek character of Pandora. The girl with the box, yes. But the story of Pandora is actually a creation story. Prometheus gave mankind fire. And at that point, there were no women on Earth. It was only men. So Zeus was so angry with Prometheus for giving mankind fire that he gave them a, quote, great evil for men, a very sweet, lovely thing to look upon in the likeness of a shy maiden. And all the gods gave her gifts, silvery raiment and a broidered veil, a wonder to behold, and bright garlands of blooming flowers upon her head. They called her Pandora, the gift of all. When this beauty was made, Zeus brought her out, and wonder took the hold of gods and men when they beheld her. From her, the first woman, comes the race of womankind, which is evil to mankind and has a nature to do evil. And this is straight from the book Mythology by Edith Hamilton. Everybody's heard of that? Yeah. So Pandora being the first woman in the Greek Parthenon, the Greek mythology, she's the first evil upon mankind. She opened a box, and all of the sins and horrors and plagues upon mankind came out. And she, but one thing that did also come out with all these horrid things was hope. Hope came out too. So they say that she is the mother of hope also.
Does it describe so is that just that her nature, like by opening the box, is that just supposed to be women's nature is evil? Is that suggested, or do they try to get at why all these bad things are in the box?
They gave two creation myths with Pandora. One was the what I just described, and the other one was they blamed it on her womankind's curiosity for opening the box and letting everything, all the plagues upon mankind come out.
Why does that sound like an Adam and Eve type thing?
Because, isn't that funny? Thank you for opening to my next story. Oh, and I'm forgetting to put the pictures up here for you guys. Yeah, it's a correlation. They all are. All these myths are. So, I can't. Okay. This was Pandora. This is a good picture of her. This is a picture of Pandora made in the pre-Raphaelite times. It was painted in 1881 by Sir Lawrence Tandium. Yep. And so it's perfect. That's her box or jar. They also say it was a jar in Greek mythology. And so that's a perfect picture of Pandora right there. She's beautiful. She's everything that you would think as, the perfect woman, but she's supposedly the destroyer of mankind with all of her plagues. All right, this picture represents the temptation of Eve. It's by William Blake. And as you can see, the serpent is wrapped around Eve in a very sensual way, if you think about it. And he's giving her the apple with his mouth, his snake mouth. Everyone is familiar with the story of Adam and Eve. One story, there's again two creation stories in the Bible. The one, she's made from the rib of Adam, and that shows that Eve was just an afterthought. And it says in the King James Version that she was even lower than the animals because she came after the animals. So, so that just shows right there that womankind was just an afterthought to Adam and God and mankind.
What verse?
It is Genesis 2:22 to 27.
She's made lower than the animals?
That's an exact quote from the King James Version.
No wonder you were like second class.
I'm sorry?
Old King James or New King James?
New King James. New King James. New. Yep. So it also says the serpent, or Satan, had told Eve that she would not die if she ate of the tree of knowledge. He said that God would not kill her because he had eaten of the tree of knowledge, and he didn't die. So, of course, curious Eve, like curious Pandora, decided to get the apple off the tree, take it to Adam. Lo and behold, here comes God's wrath rained upon them. They're kicked out of Eden and paradise. That is also, that shows women, the way God punished Eve and womankind for tempting mankind to go against God's instructions were to give her horrible pains during childbirth, and also the fact that men will always rule over women. That is verse 3 in Genesis. Chapter 3, verse 1 through 16, King James Version.
The temptation, that's why Adam doesn't have a similar punishment.
Absolutely, because Eve, no tennis elbow, no sprained ankle, nothing. All he gets is kicked out of paradise.
I never understood why either.
That's not quite accurate.
It's from the Bible.
Yeah, I know, but it does say that it's going to be much harder for him to make a living. He has to scrabble on the...
It also
Oh,
says
yeah.
that the woman will try to rule over him, but he must master it.
That's why we're talking about misogyny.
Okay, so you can't take and say that he didn't get anything. It's a
Oh, I was about to.
How bad the curse against Adam was.
Yeah, I was about to follow up with that with actually that very thing. So you guys.
So what you're saying is negative. So she gets pain in childbirth. He gets.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything. I'm saying let's be accurate as historians and as quoters.
I know.
That's all.
That's what I'm doing. I'm getting these straight from. I'm getting these quotes straight from the Bible, and I'm not going anywhere else with them. No, I paraphrased.
Right, incompletely.
I don't want to sit here and.
I know. Let's not be combative. What I'm saying is, I'm acknowledging your point that you're saying yes, like there was something bad to Adam. So let's, we can all make our own value judgments on it. We can see the point. We'll continue on.
Yeah. Thank you. I was also going to go into the Paradise Lost version of Eve because we all know that story. I think we all know the John Milton Paradise Lost. This is also paraphrasing. I'm not going to read I'm not going to read John Milton to you guys. I'm just going to paraphrase. Actually, no, this is not paraphrased. There you go. After Satan in the guise of a snake asked Eve why it is so sinful to eat from the tree of knowledge and where the offense to God lies in man attaining knowledge, Eve says, this is a quote from Paradise Lost, "What fear I then? What know to fear under this ignorance of good and evil, of God or death, of law or penalty? Here grows the cure of all, the fruit divine, fair to the eye, inviting to the taste of virtue to make wise. What hinders then to reach and feed at once with body and mind?" So saying, her rash hand in this evil hour, forth reaching for the fruit, she plucked and she ate. That is straight from John Milton's Paradise Lost. So that that of course goes and ties into the Bible, ties into the whole misogyny of Eve, against Eve in just the Bible in general.
In your opinion, what's it trying to communicate?
I think it's communicating, especially throughout the entire, throughout religious history, it communicates a definite, it's communicating power. It's communicating a power of men over women, definitely. It says it in the Bible, it says it in Paradise Lost, it says it in many other places. So it's definitely showing that there is a power for men over women.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to...
Go ahead.
I didn't know if you were going to move on to a different area.
Yeah.
Before we leave
Oh, go ahead.
the Adam and Eve story.
Yes.
In my understanding of traditional Christianity is that they don't talk about Eve being the first sinner. They talk about Adam's fall. That Adam really was the person, the human that fell.
But why did he fall?
Well, he fell because
Because of
he
a woman.
also ate of the tree.
No,
but
no,
Yeah.
not at all.
Yes.
Here's what happened.
Well, let
And
me
I
just
quote-
finish what I was going to say.
Okay, but she's got it wrong again.
Well, let me just finish, okay? And I guess the point I wanted to make was, they don't give Eve credit for being the first sinner. They give Adam credit. As if Eve, if Adam didn't succumb to Eve's, temptation, if you will.
You say mainstream Christianity spins it that way, John? I can't agree with that.
That's my...
I grew up in a mainstream Protestant second. It was always Eve.
I'm just going off the Bible.
Who was
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
but the Bible's, how many interpretations of the Bible are there, right? I mean,
You know,
that's-
and maybe it was
Exactly.
just my
Absolutely.
upbringing, I don't know.
Yeah, go
My
ahead.
thing is, why wasn't Adam punished as harshly
As harsh as Eve, you know, like the childbearing pains and
a lot?
and the men over women, that definitely, that's
Because if he
tying
was the
in.
one who really,
Absolutely, that's what I was, you stole the words.
Oh, okay. So, John, or were you saying, I don't know, I'm just maybe taking this one step farther. Are you saying, so, like, she takes the bite of the apple. She goes, all right, have some apple. And if he would have said, no, that was wrong, you shouldn't have done that, I'm not going to do that, like, his resistance might have been even to make up for her own sin.
That was my
Right.
history.
But if it could, it
To me,
would
that
suggest that men, like, are superior. Because,
In
like,
effect,
if,
it was like a misogynist thing,
Yeah.
that women didn't count. It was really the man who led to the fall, not the woman.
so the man has even more responsibility, though, because he could have stopped the whole thing by resisting the temptation.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. But that's right. But it does imply a certain hierarchy.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Okay,
Cool.
can we move on to Hypatia?
Do better.
All right, let's move on to Hypatia.
Of Alexandria. Come on, computer. There we go. Hypatia. Hypatia was a very famous Greek astronomer. She was a mathematician and she was a philosopher. She died in 415 CE. Her father is the one who taught her everything she knew. And she ended up teaching people in a forum, teaching men in a forum, mathematics, astronomy, anything they could think of, and everything she knew. She was also known for her virtue and her paganism throughout Alexandria that was becoming Christianized. Cyril, a Christian bishop, and he was also reportedly a fanatic, he told a Christian mob that had already begun sacking Jewish households, Jewish synagogues, Jewish property, that they were already in a frenzy. And he told them that Hypatia was standing between him and the imperial prefect. Imperial prefect is a title for somebody who rules in Egypt, but in the name of Rome. And he did this because she was an educated woman. She was teaching, and she was teaching men, basically. And that's because she was a very educated woman. She was a philosopher. Yeah.
and then around those times, and it still kind of reigns somewhat. Seems like if you're educated as hell, you get looked at as you're crazy.
Absolutely. I agree. So this is straight from, I'm trying to give you guys sources as I move on. This is straight from Edward Gibbon's The Fall and Decline of the Roman Empire. And to quote, she was dragged from her chariot, stripped naked, carried to Cyril's church, and they ripped the flesh from her body using oyster shells and threw her quivering bare limbs into the fire. All because she was a woman who happened to be a pagan and was an educated woman, an intelligent woman, a philosopher.
It sounds like something from Silent Hill.
I know. No, that's from the rise and decline of
Nicest video.
I understand that.
The Roman Empire.
It just sounds so Silent Hill-like.
It's crazy.
Did they give her a chance to convert? Like, was it like a Socrates
No.
thing? I'm like,
No.
or, okay.
They did not. They did not give her a chance to convert. It was Cyril just hated her because he felt like she was antagonizing the men, with her teaching, and she was beautiful, and he was a fanatic. That's what happens when fanatics are in power.
This was in the 5th century.
CE. Yeah, she died in 415 CE.
Okay.
Which is strange, because when I think of something like that, totally random, but it's like when beauty, I don't get why beauty would be looked down upon in that case, because like when I look at other cultures like China with the 3 kingdoms period, that was looked
into any historical context at all. My opinion.
So,
I like to call the Bible the war.
Were there counterparts of hers who were men who were educated in teaching and suffered similar tragedies?
no.
So none of her like other counterparts, they were offered opportunities to
Yes.
convert.
It was because she was a woman. That's why she was killed.
I mean, I get
Yeah,
that point.
yeah,
I'm
but
wanting
men-
to say if this is
Yeah.
misogyny or if there were counterparts who were on the same level who suffered the same thing.
Not that I'm aware.
In reality, it's equality, not misogyny there.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, not that I'm aware
Well,
of.
as part of, I think some of what we know about Hypatia is one of her students then wrote, I can't remember
Yes.
his name, but
I know what you're talking about.
I
And he
don't know if he
wrote,
were Christian or if he was also pagan.
I think he was a pagan, like a secret pagan, and I can't remember his name either, but he's the one that wrote about Hypatia.
I just had a question, and you said that he's, the guy who killed her thought,
Sorry.
described.
He's the bishop.
Did he write that he thought that, or is that based upon his action to interpret that he thought that?
Edward Gibbon interpreted
Okay, so
that.
that.
Yeah, that's straight
Writing
from,
several.
yeah,
bits.
and it's his interpretation.
The other question I had is how many men did she teach and respected her enough to be taught by her?
I think it ranged between 20 and 30.
So at least 20 or 30 men respected
Would
women
be-
enough to be sent under them as teachers.
Yes.
That's a pretty good ratio.
Oh, I agree, but then there's a whole Christian mob, a fanatic mob that,
Yeah,
does
right.
some pretty bad
I'm
things.
I'm gonna bet that.
But that's, you're talking about the power struggle, the politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Any
that there's
questions?
politics that mixed with
Yes,
religion.
I think it
going on
was.
here. Yeah, it's
Politics
cool.
mixed with religion, and using misogyny as a tool. Yeah, I completely agree. Any other questions about Hypatia? Go ahead.
I think not necessarily a question, but an important note to make is her description as virtuous.
Good point.
Because virtue belonged to women only up until the point it didn't, and that virtue was taken away by men. And so to be described such a way that it's out of your control
Absolutely.
it is a very misogynistic way to describe it.
I agree. And actually, as Brian said, it was written by a student of hers. So it's it's from 415 CE. This is, these are probably very, they didn't have a lot of,
Just looking at the differences between the way
Yeah.
you would describe a male teacher,
Mhm.
you would not describe him
As
virtuous. You would
virtuous,
describe him
exactly.
as academic, intelligent, strong. Virtue never entered into the conversation.
Absolutely.
So
You're
it's
absolutely right.
problematic in that
So
way.
there's another, yes.
Right. Now, the
example.
question, where is that coming from? Is it coming specifically all from religion or the culture at the time? Because I think pagan culture at this time has got it's certainly patriarchal.
Oh yeah, but it's I think it's a clash between the two, and it's a power clash because now the Christians are becoming very powerful. So especially when the Pope put this Bishop Cyril in charge of Alexandria. So
But it is rooted in religion because the idea of being virtuous is related to the idea of being a virgin, which is above all a quality that for example, Mary had. So it before religion. I'm not saying it's rooted in that because I don't know, but before religion, the idea of virtue didn't enter in because it was a simple dynamic of repopulating. So
Yeah, I'm just saying that there's other ways that you could get at misogyny in another way, though. It could manifest from, thinkers could say, well, men are stronger than women. And then you could sit there and try to dissect out a way to create an advantage from.
yeah, and also what I found funny when I was when I was doing research for this, and I was comparing Pandora to Hypatia, and they called Pandora beautiful, virtuous, and all those things too. you know, so that the gods gave her those gifts. So I think there's just a I'm sorry, what was your name?
Me?
Yeah.
Brianna.
Like Brianna was saying, there was it was scary for men, you know, to desire a woman, and especially with the religious connotations, the religious laws about adultery, about just desire, even about just thinking adulterous thoughts. It's the same thing. And bishop being supposedly celibate, that type of thing. This is in the early Christian era. I think that made a difference too.
In a case of adultery, if a male during those times were to have those kind of thoughts, would that just be looked over versus a woman having those kind of thoughts?
Well, I mean, they're thoughts, so no one can read anybody's mind. But, well, I mean, I think if a woman said during this time that she desired a man and adulterous relationship, and a man said the same thing, I think a woman would be punished harder, would be punished worse.
Yes.
The A
Yes.
one, right?
Yes.
Well,
Nathaniel Hawthorne, yes. Scarlet Letter.
And women were punished because a man felt adulterous, because it was a woman's fault for being provocative.
Yes.
Or for, yes.
Just
it
like
was never
with
a man's
Islam.
fault.
Exactly.
It was always the idea of the woman.
Exactly. Just like
the woman
with
has to
Islam.
cover up rather than the man will.
It is her responsibility to not be a provocateur,
Yep.
not a man's
It's
responsibility
but
not to have
sometimes
those
it's not
thoughts.
our fault, even if we don't even show it. But that wouldn't even be considered back then. It would be like, it's just your fault only.
Well, that's the way they were also, that was the way they were raised. I mean, that was their culture.
Right.
So,
And I think
especially as Christianity took hold.
And I think there's still some sneak ways about it today.
I see what
It's
you're
just a
saying.
little more discreet and
Yeah.
secretive versus back then where if you had that kind of thought, if you were a woman, you were crazy or you were a whore or something, every little
Absolutely.
negative connotation available.
Exactly.
Now, if it's today's standards, you desire somebody, it's okay in some way.
Oh,
But
yeah.
if you're doing the adulterous act, that's where the double-edged sword comes in. Because if it's a woman doing that with a male, it's like,
She's looked differently upon.
You're talking
whereas a
slut
man,
shaming.
yeah, whereas a guy would look like he's the man or he's a pimp.
Yeah.
Or like every negative connotation
Yeah.
turned positive.
Yes, I see what you're saying.
I would compare those two, but I don't think that it's as much as a problem as it was back then. It's not as much as an issue because that was right when Christianity was taking hold of the Western world and taking over the paganistic world and taking power over everything and using the Bible to take power from people.
I don't know what the
Asia.
adultery laws were, but I do know there's canon laws on sodomy, and that
And
guy girl doesn't matter.
Which
but,
was-
they would go in and out.
Which
Like,
was very
sometimes
popular in
yeah.
Roman
Sometimes
and
enforced, sometimes not.
In Roman and Greece history, I mean, before Christianity, that was not looked down upon. You know, homosexuality and sodomy and things like that, they were not looked down upon with Roman Greeks. Even pedophilia wasn't. So if you think about that.
But wouldn't pedophilia still be kind of okay? Wouldn't that be like okay
They-
in the time during like in the Eastern wars? Because I think Japan was popular for that, China was popular for that.
Yes.
A lot of the Asian countries.
Oh yeah, and of course in Roman and Greek ancient history, because it was consensual. You know, the child supposedly said yes.
But
You were supposed to. It was still a little taboo, but you were
Yes.
supposed to, like, if you were going to do that, you would have to provide them an education because you're doing
You'd
little
have to
schools
take
and
care of
such.
them,
You would
yeah.
have to have funded that, hire
Yep.
tutors, get him taught for the.
Yep.
I know.
You'd have to take care of him for the rest of his
But
life.
was
Yeah,
it-
basically.
if I'm correct with I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you
The
just-
Roman adoption laws were made very strict that once you adopted a child, you could do pretty much what you wanted with that child, but you had to provide for them. In fact, as in the Old Testament, you have the same thing with slaves. and with women who are men who've abandoned. There are strict rules about how they must be provided for, taken care of. There are even rules that they can't withdraw the sexual relation from them. These things are just as common in the Old Testament and the New as Roman law. It just very reflects the culture. There was an underlying theme of recognition that women had needs as men did. It was just that I think women were not to flaunt those needs, and that's how they'd see it, flaunting. We might not see it.
Okay.
But, and I think that that's really where the thing was.
Do you think that's where the rape thing goes? Like, the Old Testament, like if you rape them, then you'd have to pay 50 shekels or whatever. The father is almost like, because the rape made her non-virginal, therefore she's not as valuable being married, and therefore you have to take care of her. That's supposed to be good, although it seems that for it.
Not money wasn't to take care of her, it was to recoup the loss of the dowry her father would get by her being virginal.
But there's also
it wasn't for her, it was for him.
There's also a scene in the Old Testament laws where it talks about how if she does not cry out, she makes no sound. If she, that women, it was recognized that some women would engage consensually. And we face the same problems today when a woman claims to have been raped. It's extremely difficult to sort it out sometimes, and what are you going to do? If no one's around, what are you going to do? Did she cry out? Did she say no? Who knows?
I understand that one because that's happened to me before and no one believed me until I proved it wrong. Right. That happened, so.
Let me,
Yes, John, right?
I feel badly that we're sort of
No, this is supposed to be a group discussion.
taking over your.
No. I want you to.
One of the issues that I'm concerned about is the distinction between sexual mores, if you will, domination of men over women, that are cultural or that are religious, and how do you separate those components so that you can say this is religion per se is responsible for this misogyny versus this is a cultural issue. Maybe it's not in all cultures, but it isn't necessarily just a religious thing, it's a cultural thing. You see what I'm getting at?
I see exactly where you're getting at. It can also be both.
Yeah,
So,
for example,
that's why
she was executed, to say it mildly,
yes,
for teaching men, if you will. But is that because she was a pagan? Or because was this the standard of Christianity at the time?
I'm going off of her student and also off of I've said Gibbon's name like a million times, but he said specifically that it was because she was teaching men, because it was against the laws of St. Paul.
It's against the law of St. Paul, meaning it's against Christian beliefs.
Christian beliefs.
Yes. I might add that at this time, she was an exception.
An exception.
In pagan culture, what you call Roman or Greek era, woman's position was very, very low in society. They didn't have position at all.
They didn't have
so her position was already exceptional.
Yeah, agree.
And I think it was scary. It was frightening for people in power, especially the bishop.
Yeah.
Well, that's just the biggest running theme is a revealing or a truth telling or having the knowledge. In all three examples so far, that's been the infraction. It's been an acknowledgement of this truth or revelation.
Yes,
and I think. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Bert.
Oh, no.
I think she was
but she's heavily respected in society too, right? So if she gets keep on doing what she wants to do, and she's going to go against whatever dogmas at the time, you might want to offer.
Well, her and her father started their symposium, before the Christians had taken power in Alexandria. So after her father died, she took over the teaching. So,
but she's influential. I think that if she was like an eccentric, it may not have been as big of a deal.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Then it should have been in the school books, but it wasn't.
I agree with you. I never had heard of Hypatia until I started doing research on this.
I didn't know about her until now.
Oh, she's wonderful. There's a book about her, Hypatia. There's a movie with Rachel Weisz. You can look it up on Netflix. But yeah. Okay, this is actually, I had a long conversation with Brian about this today. This is my favorite part of this presentation. Everyone's heard of the Salem witch trials, right? Forget that.
Executed somebody without even a trial.
Yeah, forget them. Just forget it. Take it out of your head. We're going to talk about England and Europe during the 15th, 16th, and 17th century in Europe. The reason this is big, and it's bigger than Salem, is because of the fact Salem was a very small town. I'm talking about countries. I'm talking about powerful men. I'm talking about kings. I'm talking about popes. I'm talking about priests. I'm talking about people who had the power over the general population. And they wrote books, and they murdered over 1,000 women. That's just the women. That doesn't even go into the men that they killed, because they killed men too. No. Yes, teenagers especially. I'm going to start in 1316 with Pope John the 22nd. He became obsessed with the ideas of witchcraft and demonic possession.
For the first,
Nicely inside the Black Death too. Is this one of the reasons why?
No, this is 1316.
that was,
Am I right?
Yeah, that's
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking out loud, positing why he's going to go nutty on this. Okay.
yeah, he goes
Okay.
crazy.
Like I said, he was a believer in demonic possession. He was a believer in sex with Satan. He was a believer in all those things. And this was the first time in history a woman had been accused of having sex with Satan. This goes into Ireland with Lady Alice Kiteller. It's hard to say, from Kilkenny, Ireland. She was actually, she had 4 husbands, and that, of course, was looked down upon. And when bishop, the Bishop Ossory, was put in charge of southeastern Ireland by Pope Pope John the 22nd, she her 3 husbands' prior children accused her of witchcraft. And they said that she had used witchcraft to poison her husbands, and that she should be killed, she should be burned at the stake, she should, all these horrible things should be done to her. She was also accused of running an anti-Christian sect who used the swaddling clothes of unbaptized babies to make poisons to kill good Catholics.
Yes, that's a strange one. I know.
But that person's pretty special.
Yeah.
No, it was always weird. Witches too. There was often
It's
the
always-
consecrated hosts would
Yes.
often be stolen because they were supposed witches would turn those into special powers.
Yes. So under torture, her maid told the bishop that the lady was a go-between between the maid and Satan. So she would have her maid also have sex with Satan. And And so the maid tells the bishop that the devil appears as 3 black men. So throw in some racism in there too. And, back then, it's very prevalent. The maid said she saw Lady Kylter having sex with these men who personified the devil by their race. She was lucky enough to escape England and Ireland, but her poor housemaid was burned alive at the stake. So, okay, let's go 60 years later.
Sure.
Was she practicing witch or not?
No,
How do you know?
because that was what was written in history.
Who wrote it? I mean, how do you know?
Oh, me?
I'm just saying that you have to understand there are witches today. Maybe
The
they may not
Wiccans?
have any power, but there are people who claim to be witches. And they go
Wiccans.
through rituals and they do things. How do you know that she wasn't doing those things?
I mean, of course I wasn't there, but I'm going off of the research that I did for this speech.
You didn't see any mention of it.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, so you didn't see any mention of it.
Oh, you're wondering where I'm getting the research from.
Where are you getting this?
Oh, okay, it's a book called Misogyny, and it's by,
So that author has claimed that she wasn't a witch.
yes,
How does he or she know?
he's a historian. So, I mean, he did the research, I just read the book. I'm just giving the information that I did.
Her point is she was burned or threatened.
It's a good point, but we just can't, right, when we're doing this, we can't expect everyone to be an expert. So, like if you knew and say you're an expert on this and you're like, well, sometimes she did these weird rituals, but then we're throw it in.
Yeah,
that's what we're trying to do.
I'm by no means an expert on any of this. I am simply I'm simply here to discuss things that I've researched. I'm simply here to, give you guys a little bit of information. I'm not a historian. I'm a college student. So I'm a college student that is...
You're doing well.
Yeah.
You're doing well.
Okay.
That's the whole point. Is it's supposed to be like
this is just
discussion.
and it's a group discussion.
You're allowed to challenge the speaker.
Yeah.
Everyone's allowed to kind of throw in their different flavor of it.
That's absolutely, yeah. So let's move on. In 60 years later was written this book. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it, Malleus Maleficorum. Has anybody heard of it, Malleus Maleficorum? You read it? Yeah. That book was written by two German priests, Heinrich Kramer and James Springer. He didn't really write it. I think it was am I getting this right? It was Heinrich that wrote it, and James was basically he just toured with him. Am I misinterpreting that? Okay. Malleus Maleficorum means hammer of the witches, basically. That's what it means in English. And this book was published, like I said, by Heinrich Kramer in Germany. This was the first book in history of religious misogyny that actually gave instructions on how to torture women and witches and to get them to confess their witchcraft.
Even if it wasn't true?
I'm sorry?
Even if it wasn't true?
Yes.
When was this written?
This was written in 1487. Yes. So, a huge, powerful man, and this is where I'm talking about the popes and the priests, and later when I get to King James VI of Scotland, a man became their accomplice named Pope Innocent the Eighth. He's the reason that the Maleficarum spread so far into Western Europe, into Denmark, especially the Scandinavian countries, places like that. He
gives a papal bull.
Yeah, a papal bull. Yes, absolutely, saying use this, and then Kramer and Springer, I'm really bad with that name. They went and basically went through the countryside and started torturing some witches and getting and burning women at the stake. Like I said, it was mostly women, but they definitely burned men at the stake too. They accused men of being warlocks.
So this iron bowl, was it like
Papal bull.
Okay. It sounds like that one thing they tortured in Spain, but it was like an iron.
No, this is basically a decree from the Pope that says that.
I'm thinking of a torture.
No. I'm going to talk about torture in a minute, but no, it's a papal decree that says that the book is correct. So and says that he believes it. We'll go ahead a little bit because I really want to get to your guys' some more opinions about more misogyny, or if you guys want to talk about other things, we can do that too. But James VI of Scotland, of course, was the heir of Elizabeth I of England. When he was the King of Scotland, he first witnessed witchcraft in Denmark. He went to Denmark to collect his queen, Anne, because he wanted, because her ships were destroyed by a bunch of storms, like huge storms in the ocean destroyed her ships, so she had to go back to Denmark. So he said, you know what, I'll just get my ships and I'll go. And he went to get her, and when he got there, they had collected women who had allegedly confessed to conjuring up these storms to kill Anne. So that was when James VI became basically another fanatic against witchcraft. When he became the King of England in 1603, am I right about that? That's when Elizabeth died. Yeah. Okay. So in 1603, when James became the King of England, he brought this fanaticism of witchcraft from Denmark from Scotland into England, and he wrote a book called Demonology. And that was actually written he wrote it in a way where it's two characters that were talking to each other about witchcraft, and the one character basically talks the other character into believing in witchcraft and saying it's true. This brings up the famous, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him, Matthew Hopkins. Has anybody heard of Matthew Hopkins? Matthew Hopkins was, what they called him was the Witchfinder General. And he went through the entire country of England, into France, and he tortured and got 200 women to confess to witchcraft. I'll show it to you. This is a different book. It's called Witchfinder by Malcolm Gaskell. Yeah, it's called Witchfinder by Malcolm Gaskell. So the kind of tortures that they would do to these women is they would do something called thumb screws, and that's when they would take your thumbs, basically put it in a vise and crush your thumbs until you confessed. There's evidence of a woman named Gillias Duncan who was accused of being a witch by her master. She was a maidservant, and he accused her of being a witch, and he crushed her thumbs. He did something called wrenching, put a rope around her head, and they tightened it until it pretty much almost fractures your skull. And it gives you the burns of the rope across your face and everything else. They did some horrible things. That's not even the most of it. That's just scratching the surface, and I'm not even going to go into more.
Because I don't even have those chips.
But she ended up, of course, being tried and convicted of witchcraft, and she was burned at the stake.
My thing is, where did this idea of witchcraft even come from?
The Bible.
Oh, my bad.
Sorcerers and stuff. I'm sure magic is long.
Oh yeah, but especially because they took it from the pagans and Wiccans and things like that. So, but also the verse in it's in Leviticus, right, or is it in Deuteronomy? The verse about the witches.
Rebellion is a sin of witchcraft?
No, the witches should be killed. Yeah.
If it came from
Deuteronomy. Yes.
If it came from there was this one I kept hearing about, but I think it was in England. I can't remember the name. Maybe I think it was it started with an M, but that's all I remember.
You're talking about what I just talked about, the book,
no, it was in England. It was, I think it could have been fiction. I might be off.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
So there was something about a warlock or something.
You might be thinking of Salem too. So.
Then I'm probably shopping.
Just to sort of redirect this a little bit, you're talking about sort of people who somehow are involved in evil spirits, and that's the blame for bad things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But how does misogyny come into this? I mean, there were men who were tortured too, who were accused of. So why is this misogyny per se,
Because if you
if
look
both
at
men and women are being accused and then tortured.
Because if you look at the ratios of the numbers of women compared to men, women are much larger. I'm telling you, it's like 85% larger. So mostly women were killed as witches. Like I said, they did torture and kill men, and they were usually poor men, old men, people who were peddlers on the street, that type of thing. The same that they did with women. What am I thinking of? Midwives. Midwives, anybody that knew about healing plants, healing anything like that. But it was hugely women that were murdered during this time.
You're attributing this to religion in the sense that
well, I'm taking the Malleus Maleficarum.
it's the dark side, and the religion would be on the other side, and therefore it was religion that led to the misogyny and the persecution of women as
witches. Yes. I'm talking
this is
about.
institutionalized by the church. I mean, in 1468, they allowed torture, right, through papal bull. That it's okay to get confessions through torture for witchcraft specifically. They made that criminum acceptance. So you're allowed to use it for that, but maybe not for, I don't know, murder or something else. But so the main exception for that, and then also later, Innocent recognizes another bull or encyclical says that witches in fact do exist, and that's 1484. So like you have people that are a lot of authority and influence that
especially in the
giving
church.
this okay.
Yeah.
So
Popes, Pope. That's pretty
gotta
big.
believe that's going to have something to do with vigilante justice.
Exactly.
I mean, the church was really. I mean, this was sort of.
They gave this legs.
Yeah, they did.
And it was the church that was sort of in charge of things, more or less. So in effect, they were almost like the government, if you will.
Yeah.
They were the authority.
Yeah, I'm sure that there were probably instances, some community claiming someone's a witch and bringing them out.
I'm not trying to defend religion. I'm just trying to figure out to what extent is religion per se responsible for this misogyny.
Well, like Brian said, especially during these times, I think religion is completely responsible for misogyny. I mean, you're talking about a papal bull. I mean, it's not just somebody on the street saying that lady's a witch. It's from the Pope. So that basically gives them permission to kill these people.
Two problems during this period of time you're speaking of. One is that because the women's obviously have a cycle that is in line with nature more, women were seen to be much closer to nature and much more in tune with the powers of nature. That sets up a power struggle between women and men, because men are seen to be more of an artificial, what we would call artificial power, a power structure, while women were more in tune with nature. And that's a constant, not just in religion, that's constant. I've just finished reading a bunch of books on Russian history of the communist history. They had the same problem then. The women were seen in a certain way that caused them to believe that they were closer to nature. So if a woman did gather plants from out there and do miraculous things, it must be the devil, because God would only give that power to men, the authorities in turn. Okay, that's a really important thing to understand. The second thing to understand about this period of time is that there is a separation between the spirit and the body, and the body loses, because saving the woman was why they tortured her, because confession was how they forgave her, so she could go to heaven. Now, if you live in a culture in which the spiritual is more important than the body, you might do things like the Inquisition, you might do things like that and think you're doing good. You might actually think you're loving the women. Now, personally, I doubt that very many people who accuse women of being witches thought that way, but underneath this is a justification for that kind of action toward women, men, or anybody else.
And you're right, especially when you start thinking about Salem. That's a perfect example.
Could witches go to heaven though? Or do we
No, witches go to
hell.
hell.
Confess witch. I'm going to get burned or whatever. and I confess right before the flames are going up.
The priest was always there, ready to
I
have
think that's right.
And even the witches were out.
Would they deny me that?
No, they wouldn't. They would, according to the Pope, they wouldn't, because the point was not to kill the woman, the point was to bring repentance so she could go to heaven. And it wasn't meant to. That's if there was a silver lining, that's probably it. You know? Not much of a silver lining there, but.
Yeah.
Grace.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Something I was thinking is if there was like a wider cultural view, like as far as looking at women as witches and stuff, and so maybe it started like in the culture, and the Pope is who happened to be in power, and so he did something about it.
Well, this Pope was obsessed with the idea of demons and witchcraft and things like that. So that's how this Pope got started with his papal bulls and those type of things, was because he was obsessed with those ideas. And yes, go ahead.
I'll finish.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just wondering if you found in your reading, was it similar to Hypatia where women, because you mentioned like midwives and those who did medicinal herbs and stuff, was it mostly women who were educated that were found out to be witches, or?
Like, I'm sorry, what's your name, sir? Okay, like Laverne was saying, I think it was a special kind of education that men didn't have. With women were more, like he said, in tune with nature, and they were using these, herbs and flowers, and they were healing people.
They're natural. So I'd pay more for, like, if I wanted to cheat death, I'd pay more for a potion from a woman, than a dude. Assuming that she would just naturally has that better.
Yes. So I think
Asians are
that's.
better at now.
Yes. So I think that's.
Stereotype.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's,
Exactly. And, they always talk about Salem as being, the great hysteria of Salem. So
I think it's more of the European nations that had it.
Europe, it was way worse. Salem was like a mob. These little girls that were, being little adolescents and things.
yeah, and it wasn't sanctioned by the government.
No, it was not.
Right.
Absolutely not.
So
It was not.
So in modern times, what they did back then would have been deemed unconstitutional, correct?
Well, I think what's happened is this gives it a lot more legs. I mean, you can have a racist society, right? But then if you come out with a Supreme Court saying separate but equal, you're saying, oh, well, it's okay. Our best and our brightest have come up with a good justification. Now you don't even have to feel like you're racist anymore because you're looking at the separate but equal judgment. So that's I think what's going on is when it gets validated here. Now it's kind of okay.
I thought with something like what you would say on them, like I would think that would be unconstitutional because it would have been considered.
They were still a
It's a
colony.
colony,
Massachusetts was
Right.
still a colony.
But this is going on. There's not roads.
They still have.
These are probably local.
Exactly.
They're
And
caught up
Salem
there.
was a small village outside of Boston.
Exactly.
They probably had about maybe 100 people in the village.
It's like a Wild Wild West. There's
Yeah, it's a mob mentality is what I would call it. So with Salem,
Council in the school.
I would say way worse than that. Because these girls were accusing people of witchcraft and people were dying. I think 14, and actually I think 5 of them were men.
Yeah, because there was more women during that time that were slaughtered off.
Well, in Salem, it was almost even.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
See, they never say that in the schools. They always say it was
Forget
more
everything your history teacher told you.
I'm about to say fuck history teacher.
No, there's a good book you can read called, Brian, do you know the book I'm talking about? Oh, man, I forgot.
Oh, if you don't tell me the title.
It's called, oh man, I'll think of it. I'll let you guys know. I'll put it on the website. But it's a really good book about different things that were taught in history class and are not true, like about Columbus being this great guy, but actually he murdered an indigenous people, so things like that. So the same thing with Salem. So that's pretty much basically the end. That's Matthew Hopkins right there. He's stirring up the fire.
I didn't realize the extent that witchcraft was like the Inquisition and going on witchcraft was institutionalized in Europe. And a lot of this stuff is post-Renaissance too, which is just a little shocking to me. Yeah.
I was fascinated when I didn't know about this either, and when I started reading about it, it was fascinating. I didn't realize that it was so big in Europe.
There's a couple things that we have to bear in mind. First of all, we don't believe in witchcraft. Is there anybody here really believes in witchcraft?
No.
What if everybody did believe in witchcraft? What if it was just everybody believed in spirits and ghosts and all the things of paranormal? It was just a normal part of it. It would be very easy to get carried away.
Oh yeah.
About some strange woman at the edge of town doing weird things, making cows, and blame things on somebody. It's all human. And you don't need religion to do it. Religion is often used to justify what we are afraid of anyway.
And that's what I was trying to.
The second thing you've got to think about is that back in the 1500s, there's a transition going on in Europe and the United States, and that's a transition from where is knowledge? Knowledge resides in the authorities in that period of time. So if you get something, a papal bull saying, this is knowledge, you don't question it. You enact it. We are much more in an individualistic. Knowledge resides in the individual. And so we say, look at it. How can you believe that? Because the only thing that we can see here is you quote books. Why do you believe the books? Because they're published. So we got the same sort of thing going on, but just not, we try to think of ourselves more individual. So knowledge resides in the individual now. Then it didn't. It resided in the authorities. So it was very easy for you to stir up a mob and make them do what you think, It didn't turn that way.
But yeah, right, I get it. But institutionalized in this way, but then the Black Death is rolling through.
Yes.
Right? You're talking about how the body is, definitely inferior to the spirit. But yet priests during the Black Death are afraid to give less rights, essentially jamming these people. Like that this is commonplace, right?
And
so it's like religion doesn't step up.
And you have to remember that none of the authorities you're talking about are women.
Exactly.
None of the authorities you're talking about are women.
Or very few.
And that is the institutional aspect of culture, which is informed by religion. And making these authorities say and do one thing and you respect that knowledge, and none of them are women.
But you could have a woman to say, I can tell this. So, I mean, like, it's...
You could, because
imagine if a woman spoke up against the Pope.
I'm trying to think of a powerful woman. Elizabeth I, she's sort of in this time period. I'd be like the one person that maybe could.
She was she was in England before the She was in England. This was James
Scotland, though.
James VI, which is the same person.
This is another female.
Mary Queen of Scots, but she
But did she get executed for something else?
she got executed because she was supposedly one of the
I'm just saying, I'm trying to think of another woman that's got.
How much time do I have? All
right. Yes, what you're saying with the power, especially in the religious community, being with men.
But to Gail's point, if there were more women in power, would have gone like, if 20% of the powerful people were women, would it have got off like this? Probably not.
Yeah, but I mean, we're not talking about Fantasyland. We're talking about what happened, So, and also like in the 17th century, in the 1600s, during the bubonic plague, that was a time where there was a huge upheaval, not only in cultural with Cromwell and the death of Charles I and things like that, but also with people getting sick and dying from the bubonic plague, and they're blaming that on witches too. So there's lots of things going on, but I really throughout my readings, it's all stemmed from some kind of religious belief.
Do you believe, like in your opinion, then, because the Catholic Church is hierarchical and structuralized in this way, it would have gotten worse, as opposed if, you could have fanaticism, like you said, mob rule anywhere, people like spiritual, just crazy, just doing this stuff, but since it was institutionalized, I guess it hurt more.
I think that, yeah, I see the argument, but I'm talking about just from what I've read and from just the historical perspective, that all of this nonsense, all this, all these deaths. I mean, I'm talking about thousands of people are dead, and it stemmed from religion. You can't argue that it didn't. It did. It could have gone another way, but it didn't. So, you had a question, sir?
I was just going to comment that things really haven't changed that much. I don't want to get too political, but and I'm certainly not endorsing Hillary, but she's getting brutally hammered over something if a guy did. So I'm not endorsing her.
Like
but
pneumonia?
My observation. Even today, women leaders, women anything, congressmen, senators, they always seem to have a different standard by what's.
That really raises a point. You said earlier, what if women, 20% of the women, had 20% of the power positions in Europe at this time would have been held by women? If you say that women are somehow psychologically different than men, and if you put them in those positions of power, it would have affected history in a better, from our perspective, way. Then you have to say that women are different than men. And if you say women are different than men, then isn't it true that some jobs might be better for women and some jobs, you see where it goes? You can't claim that they're different at the same time you say they're not.
No, but
I never claimed that they were different.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, but I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I think no. If you look at how Elizabeth I acts, and same with Catherine Gray, they're acting very much like their counterparts, right? In some ways, more so. Like but Elizabeth I wasn't shying away from torture at all. Like she ordered it directly. So that means she's a tough chick. I mean, so I don't think that, but I think that if you did have sermon, they would there might be something different, carving out women as something else. I don't even know if they would have said, they might have said we're different, but you can't say there's different. Like there's a difference between different and lower. And so it could have had.
I was gonna actually mention, because you said Russian during the communist. You're reading about that, and this is not. I'm talking about the present, but Ukraine women in Ukraine area and Russia, the patriarchy of the church and women going against that, especially a group called Femin International, and Ina Shevchenko is the president of that, and they basically, they take off their shirts and they attack people because they're trying to say you are not going to rule my body, and these patriarchs, they're high up in the church, they're the patriarchs of the church, and then and Putin, so it's still going on now, you can see it. So
again, that is as a guy named Indiscipline and Punished by Foucault 30 years ago. He talks about the whole punishment system and thing. His point, I disagree with him in some ways, but his point in his book, Discipline and Punished, is that there's a change in how we view human beings. You view human beings as a body, I would say, inhabited by a soul, meaning just a personality. They view it as a spirit who happened to be in a body, but the spirit is what counted. So when you start just defining human beings differently, you're going to have a totally different justification for all kinds of things. And it's very incumbent upon us not to be too heavy on the people who live in a culture different than ours, and too judgmental and angry at them for their ignorance.
What about nowadays?
Right now, it's
the
now
same
we have
things
a bunch
happening.
of people that are secular, but yet you still have some hardcore fundamentalists that believe something similar to what we have.
I watched a video of a woman from she was an anointed minister, and she was driving in her car, filming herself as she's telling people to get rid of witch hazel because it has the word witch, get rid of your dirt devils because it has the word devil, get rid of your Harry Potter books because they're, the devil's going to poke you if you're reading Harry Potter, and she's a fundamentalist Christian, so in those fundamentalists, and it's funny because she's a woman, she's a woman in a supposedly powerful position, but
More goes on. I mean, take the idea of Sharia courts in London.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right?
Absolutely.
There are women that are being forced to, are pressured into going Sharia courts, and they're not getting the protection secular.
Yep, because Sharia courts are still have to abide by British law, but a woman's not going to go to the British government because she's going to be.
Well, if you're a second wife, you
Yeah.
can't claim you're married.
No.
The other thing is the woman believes the Sharia law is the law of God, her God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, would you say her God was wrong, or would you say her God's her God?
But it's not always. Remember, it's not just completely her choice. Like that, that she's chosen this. She's like, I really like this conservative religion because I like the cut of its jib. There's a lot of pressures. She could be kicked out of her entire community.
Out of her entire.
But you've got to be sympathetic to those people, like the Jehovah's Witness, like that wants to get out. But like this is hard. You got to think, well, is this the last conversation I will ever want to have with my parents?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I want out, but I mean, these are hard.
I had a neighbor who was a Jehovah's Witness, and he would refuse to walk his daughter down the aisle for her marriage because she had left the church.
Dan and Emily Weavy from here, yeah.
It's out there. It's
amazing stories.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think with the first one you mentioned with that, like the dirt girl, I'm like, that just sounds more like she might be just mentally ill.
Actually, I put it on my Facebook page, and she took it off. Yeah, she took it off of all social media because people were attacking her because it was so ridiculous. So, does anybody else have anything they want to say about this presentation? Go ahead.
So I was
What's your name?
Grace.
Grace, okay.
So I was thinking about the point of women in power making a difference. And so I think one thing that is different is on average, they're more likely to be just sympathetic to women. Now, with having the influence of religion is going to affect that because yes, a woman can have the same anti-woman ideas. That's internalized misogyny. Mm-hmm. So I think if you want to counteract that, you need to take it from both approaches, lessening the influence of religion and having more women in power.
I see what you're saying. I did this presentation because I was just exploring the misogyny of religion. There is misogyny in religion. We've seen it, and I was just, I'm giving examples of it. I don't have enough time to go into the cultural aspects of it. I just am able to have enough time to go into the actual misogyny that we see in religion, and it's not just Christianity. I'm not talking just about Christianity. I'm talking about ancient Greece. I'm talking about also everyone knows Islam. I mentioned Russia. It's not just just Christianity. It's a lot of. Go ahead, Sandra. Did you have a question? Oh, but I can't explore, in an hour and a half, I can't explore the cultural aspects of it. So I wish I could. Yeah, I wish I could have taken that on, but the only thing I could take on was.
Can you define for me misogyny? Because I think of misogyny as the hate for the women.
Yeah.
And yet I'm not sure that what we've discussed today is misogyny as much as cultural bias against women, which is a different thing. Hatred is one thing, and cultural bias because of the structure or whatever is a different thing.
I see a hatred. I see it differently than you. I see it in the story of Eve. I see it in the story of Pandora. When I see, in that the book that Edith Hamilton wrote, Mythology, she got her stories from Hesiod. So, and he said the words evil. Womankind is an evil to mankind. So when I see that kind of stuff and you see 1,000 women being burned at the stake by people like Matthew Hopkins, that's a hatred. That doesn't come from any other place but a deep hate for women. So
misogyny isn't hate, though.
Misogyny is hate. The hate of prejudice of women, and also you could think misanthropy, which is the same thing. Hate, but people, yeah. So it's a hate or prejudice against.
Exclusion, sex discrimination, androcentrism, patriarchy, all of it is
Same. Yep.
Yeah.
So
I think it doesn't always but with hatred, I think is the strongest thing. It doesn't always manifest itself as hatred as much as it does that patriarchal bias, the lesser than. That's more what.
I would disagree with you. I'm just going by what I've learned. Misogyny is, I mean, if you separate the word.
Yeah. I can hate the color blue.
Oh yeah.
But as long as I'm not the president ban blue, like who gives a shit, right?
Yeah.
It almost, there has to be like some effect. I mean, I can.
Well, something is pushing it forward, and that's why I did this presentation on religion being the thing that pushes misogyny forward through history. So, go ahead, John. John, right? Was I right?
John.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But just because I'm kind of hung up on this religion versus cultural, to me, misogyny, it's really a cultural problem. And the reason that religion becomes important is we understand that cultural norms or cultural mores are man-made. We've created that as a society. But when they inject religion into it, the culture, if it's man-made, we can talk about whether it's the right position or in the wrong position or it should be, improved. But when religion is said, well, this is what religion says. It's saying it's not a question for men, or I shouldn't say humans, to dispute. It's what God has ordained. It's what God has done, and so therefore, it gives it a power that it doesn't have as just a cultural phenomenon.
Well, the times I'm talking about, the culture was religion. It wasn't anything else but religion. So
right. The religion was.
It's basically one and the same.
Yes, and so you could say, well, it's just the culture of the time, but because of the papal bulls, because it was sort of legitimized
by the Pope
as saying it was God. God is doing this. That's what gave it a permanence and sort of an indisputability that a cultural norm wouldn't have.
Yeah. So if you were a philosopher at that time, it would have been tough to go against.
Hey,
yep.
Yeah, it's right. It's what God.
Especially when you have popes and kings and.
So that's to me that's the problem that religion creates.
Yeah. Agreed.
I agree. I would agree with that definitely, but.
It's a problem with every social structure of power. People always use power. They always desire power because they always like to control other people. Marx was all about that. And
religion,
different people said different things, but Rousseau argues that the minute you set up any sort of person over another person, you're setting up chains.
I remember being in school.
That's one way to look at it.
Where I was, in an argument. It was a religion school, and I was arguing about something as a non-religious person, in the closet still, and then the professor played the trump card. He said, "But what does the Bible say?" And I said, "End of discussion. I can't. If that's the standard, is what the religion says, then there's no further discussion." It was like he played the trump card, and religion is that trump card.
Kind of ironic that we're in a situation in which you've got your views, I got my views. Doesn't matter. You got your views, I got my views. If my views are good, better than yours, so what? There's no adjudication. So God is the adjudication card, but we can't even agree what adjudication card.
Well said. I'm going to cut everybody off there. It's 8:30. Feel free to stay and argue amongst yourselves.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Yeah, I did last time too. I always pick the controversial.
Restrooms back there. Grab a chips or cookies if you want. And mingle and talk. We'll be here for a little while.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate you listening to me practice my oral presentation.